So recently we had a textbook example of why the alt left, that unfortunately has become the vocal minority, is usually utterly clueless about what it is that they're debating about. And there were two really good examples that just took place. We're going to go over both of them in this video. First, let's start with some congressional testimony regarding trans athletes in sports.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are three sexes: male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And
I'm glad that she brought up that she's not a doctor, because I just watched this fantastic video by a doctor who happens to be gay on the issue of transgender women competing in sports. I will link it in the description of this video.
there are an infinite number of genders because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl. Okay, biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
That's okay, I found a physician who could speak to that. But I do want to point out that it's fucking asinine to suggest that you can't answer a question that is so simple and obvious just because you're not a doctor. We don't go to doctors to ask if people have advantages in sports. It's very clear. This is just like that judge appointee saying that they're not a biologist, so they can't answer what a woman is.
What's your real world experience?
It depends. I mean, there are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are shorter.
This is another argument that I'm tired of hearing, but it's just suggest, well, some girls are taller than other girls. Some boys are taller. Should they not be allowed to enter sports? You know, people have inherited advantages. You know, the issue of height, for example, is only one piece of a much larger issue of what happens between males and females and the exposure to testosterone during puberty. And trying to simplify it to that one thing is ridiculous, because yes, there's height, but then there's also the size of your lungs, the size of your heart, the actual muscle composition, and the fibers themselves are different. All of this will be gone over in the video that I just recommended if you haven't already seen it. I've done 2 videos on this topic myself, and I've read all of the research. It's just silly to suggest that you can simplify it down to something just as simple as height.
Biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case.
I wonder what news article she was looking at, because most of us already know that that's just ridiculous. Riley Gaines is going to try to set her straight here in a moment, not that she's ever going to admit to this otherwise, but because of the fact that I know people will watch this who are not aware of this, I'm going to provide a link to this article in the description.
She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women.
Yep. And the main point that I'm getting at here is that it is astonishing to me that this other woman, who is apparently of distinguished credibility enough that she is testifying before Congress, was ignorant of this fact. That's kind of the point I have here, is that in many cases, these people are just repeating, the narrative, and they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And it just makes them look like idiots. Let's hear from Serena Williams herself.
Well, actually, it's funny because Andy Murray, he was been joking about myself and him playing a match, and I'm like, Andy, seriously, are you kidding me? Because for me, men's tennis and women's tennis are completely almost 2 separate sports. So I'm like, if I were to play Andy Murray, I would lose 6-0, 6-0 in 5 to 6 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, because no, it's true. It's true. It's a completely. It's a completely different sport. The men are a lot faster, and they serve harder, they hit harder. It's just a different game, and I love to play women's tennis, and I only want to play girls because I don't want to be embarrassed. I would not do the tour. I wouldn't do Billie Jean any justice. So Andy, stop it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you kill me.
Now, taking that into account and putting it with some of the morons who suggest that we should just desegregate sports altogether, you wouldn't even know who Serena Williams is, if that were the case. But let's get back to the video.
My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Now, since we were talking about swimming and specifically the advantages of gender, let's have a look back at what it looks like when Leah Thomas is competing with women in swimming and actually doing their best.
So here she is. Bang, first place. Now, watch how long it takes for the others to catch up. Nope, they're not finishing yet. They've all still got to bound back, which means she lapped them. Still sitting there by herself at the finish line. And still sitting there by herself at the finish line. And there comes second place. Bang. That's how long it took for everybody to catch up.
In this same video, I also play some examples of the track athletes that had to deal with this problem. And when you're dealing with the problem in high school, it's even worse because trans athletes are not actually required to take the hormone blockers. So effectively, you're racing against, what amounts to biological boys. And as I've demonstrated many times in this channel, the track records, meaning for track and field, for athletic high school boys actually are better than the Olympic women's track and field records.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female. I mean, I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves.
I mean, what a sober and personable take. This guy, he obviously still has compassion, and he doesn't want these people to be discriminated against based on what he put as immutable characteristics. I mean, he's a smart guy. He's not that vicious, right-wing hate monger that everybody suggests anyone who dares to question this is.
And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights.
Another very salient point, and that's something, unfortunately, that the alt-left is not satisfied with. I've interacted with people in my own school district, meaning for my kids, that have just openly stated, no, we need to be able to talk to these kids about these things, whether the parents want them to or not. And it's interesting because now they're screaming parents' rights. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about the idiot that's on the left of my picture here.
And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Kennedy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases.
No, don't backpedal now, because that's not what you said a minute ago.
Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women.
So you're asking an elderly man who happens to just live the life of a senator whether or not he could beat Serena Williams. This is a ridiculous mischaracterization of what the argument was. Earlier, you suggested that there were men saying that they could even just score a point on her. And as you've been corrected, although I once again doubt she has any idea what she's talking about with regards to Serena Williams, because she probably didn't bother to look it up, right? But this is not the comparison we're looking for. Yes, an elderly woman of that age wouldn't be able to, go against Serena Williams either.
And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about.
And Riley Gaines deserves to be in a competitive situation where she's competing against people who do not have an unearned advantage.
And as a cisgender Black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
Well, that's the privileged position of being somebody who's never been in a situation where they had to shed a drop of sweat to get good at a sport, or where it may be the difference between getting into college and not getting into college. This is one of the biggest problems with all this. The vast majority of the people that are arguing in favor of this have no skin in the game, something that they complain about all the time. But they very clearly showed no, understanding whatsoever of what goes into it. And the moron on the left, Emma Vigilant, or however the hell you say her last name, made similar comments on Twitter. I'm not going to go over them now, but I made the same, statement to her, which was, you're speaking like someone from the position of privilege, having never actually worked to get good at a sport, or, actively cared about being involved in a sport, because it's not the same. These girls bust their asses, and they deserve to have that right to be in a situation where they're going to compete with other girls who busted their asses. And I know plenty of, transgender people who recognize that this is just stupid. You can't do this. You're going into a situation where you knowingly have an advantage that you did not have to work for. It's not just about the gender at that point. It's unsportsmanlike. It's dishonorable. Like, the ethics of the situation are completely in question. And this is why we ostracize athletes that are caught using, PEDs and such. Because it ruins the whole spirit of why everybody's out there doing this. So Emma Vigeland went on Tim Pool, and we're going to be discussing some of that.
So we can look at what happened.
And you said parental rights. I'm curious what you mean by that.
Yeah,
I'm in favor of parental rights, right? Like, I want parents to be able to, if their child is transitioning, to be able to work with their doctor with a plan and make sure that children are not being driven to suicidal ideation, and that parents aren't restricted by the state from...
Let's talk about one of his policies.
Okay, go ahead.
See, she's going to say parental rights now, but I guarantee she was not on board with the parental rights to suggest that perhaps certain books shouldn't be included in schools' curriculums or be available publicly in those schools. And she certainly wouldn't be on board with the parental rights of a parent who does not want their child to undergo medical transition before they're 18. In fact, the position of the left generally is that people like that should lose their children. They support the idea that CPS should be allowed to take people's children if they're not on board with transition. So they're all about parental rights so long as they agree with the parents in question.
I don't want parents to be restricted from the state from giving healthcare to their children.
If I open this book on YouTube, the stream will get taken down.
Okay.
Did you ever read this book?
No.
This book is in middle schools in Florida. Ron DeSantis had it removed. That's one simple policy he did. That's very good. You've never seen this book?
I've heard about it.
Have you ever looked inside of it?
No, but I mean, I don't believe in censorship.
If I show
Two things here. She doesn't even know what's in genderqueer. And she says she's not on board with censorship. Now, I haven't been able to confirm what her specific position was on the censorship of Donald Trump's Twitter account or the censorship of anyone else, but I would hazard a guess, because the general far left, alt-left position is that censorship is fine so long as, it's against what they refer to as hate speech or deplatforming works and is very important, as AOC said. That's not actually the position of the left that I was part of. As I illustrated in my video, where I compared AOC to Bernie Sanders on this topic, which is that no, censorship is not okay. The thing is that just like everything else, they're going to cry censorship if it's censoring of anything that they approve of. And they're going to be all for censorship if it's censorship of things they don't approve of. But primarily, and most importantly, she doesn't even know what's in the damn book.
A picture of a blowjob, would you be offended?
I mean,
can I show you a picture of a blowjob?
I wouldn't be offended. I mean, I think that, honestly, do you know, Tim, that the more children learn about sexual education in the way that's productive and done in schools, the less likely they are to be sexually abused because they know what is good and what is bad.
I can't share this image on YouTube.
Do you hear me though about that?
So I think
the more children learn about sexual education, the less likely they are to be victims of pedophilia and rape.
I think that the issue is you're confusing sexual education with kink. Right, so I'm looking at this right now. I can't even hold it up because I can't point it at the camera.
Here, Tim, let me help you since I'm already shadow banned anyway. By the way, the original doesn't have these siren images covering anything up. It's very graphic and direct. Let me just go ahead and read some of the dialogue here. Fast forward, we've been dating for 2 months. We've made out. We've had sex. We've moved on to sexting at work. I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You are going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside me. Holy shit. Yeah, I would agree. And then the person in question says, this is the most turned on I've ever been in my life. I am dying. Okay? This is what she doesn't even know is in this book. I guarantee you that she's ranted endlessly about the supposed moral panic on the part of conservatives about what's in these books, and probably just referred to it as, the craving censorship, authoritarianism of the right wing. Okay, well, I'm not right wing. This book doesn't belong in schools. If you yourself, as a parent, want to buy this for your child, then you may do so. And even the most ardent conservatives that I at least associate with are not suggesting that this book should be burned or unable to be read in the entire country. But it shouldn't just be sitting on the shelf for a child to get their hands on in a school. And that's what happened in Dearborn, Michigan. A 4th grader got their hands on this book, which led to the huge protest and a very awkward interaction between the school board of Dearborn and the Muslim population that is finally coming out and saying, we're actually not really on board with this. But Emma, once again, a person with a big audience, held in high esteem, has been on the Young Turks, is, Sam Cedars co-host, has no idea what's in this book.
And I don't understand why school children should be taught how to perform blowjobs for an autoandrophile.
I don't believe they're being taught that.
Why was this book
banned? I don't really know. Again,
Amazon
because this is another case-by-case example.
No. You asked me about what Ron DeSantis did. You asked me what Ron DeSantis did that I liked.
That he banned genderqueer?
That he's removing pornographic and kink books from middle schools is a very, very good one. And I would.
Well, for me, my politics are a little broader than that, Tim. I got to say.
Yes, I'm sure your politics go a lot deeper than that. That doesn't change the fact that you and the people on your show, who have way more subscribers than you ever deserve, openly state that this sort of thing isn't happening and that it's all right-wing conspiracy fear-mongering.
So, listen, if your argument to me is that I or anyone else should support your politics because you want to show blowjobs to children, you're going to lose.
Well, I don't think that is a policy done by teachers in this country. I think that this
book was in schools in Florida, which is why
there are a ton of books that are in a ton of schools. I don't believe in censorship. That's not my bag, buddy.
So you think children should have Playboy?
I don't really think so. No, because that's pornography.
So you think a blowjob?
You're in favor of censorship.
So Tim totally backs her into a corner here by pointing out, well, should we have Playboy in schools? Should we have Penthouse in schools? Because she's giving the I don't back censorship nonsense. And then, she's like, well, no, I don't think so. That's pornography. Well, what is this? This is pornography. And then, once she realizes how stupid she looks for a second, she tries to deflect away and go, well, you're pro-censorship.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
Oh, that's good to know.
If you watched the show, you'd know this.
Oh, you're okay.
We talk about,
and she thinks that's a gotcha. That makes her look good by saying, "Well, you're pro-censorship." It'll provide her and her idiot co-hosts a soundbite to try to make Tim look bad. But it doesn't change the fact that she's trying to deflect away from what's in the book. She desperately doesn't want to address what's in the book. She just stated that Playboy and Penthouse or Hustler should be censored from schools because, well, that's pornography, but doesn't want to discuss what's in this book.
I am not. I want children to be able to have all the information that they need in order to
including pornography.
No, that's not pornography.
This is not pornography. Graphic depictions of a blowjob is not pornography. You know, talking about how they can't wait to have them inside them, that's not pornography. This is sex ed that kids need.
That was God striking you down.
That was
Tim.
the YouTube
striking me down. You're the one arguing for.
You're the one arguing for censorship.
Yes.
I mean, I don't really mind that stuff. I mean, are you in favor of children seeing violence on television?
Well, look at that. I guess it's time to pivot. Now we're talking about violence? No, she's trying to desperately change the subject because she knows that this book makes her look like a moron.
No.
That scares me a little bit more.
It depends. It's not so simple to say violence, right? But yes, censorship is a good thing, but when done bad is a bad thing.
Yeah.
For instance, Ian Crossland, who is a co-host on Timcast IRL, used to be a moderator for Minds.com, and he had to filter out graphic depictions of murder and rape and child abuse. Censorship is absolutely vital in that regard. So if we're talking about a book like, in particular, there was one called, there's a teacher who provided a book to her middle schoolers called This Book is Gay. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have heard. That's actually a very good book.
And it provides instruction on she provided instruction to children on how to use adult gay anonymous sex apps.
So here's the portions of This Book is Gay that he's talking about. And it gives detailed instructions on how to use anonymous sex hookup apps. Is this the important sexual information that they need? She just said that this is a great book. Why do children need to know how to use anonymous gay sex apps? More to the point, straight or gay, this also suggests that you should just be promiscuous and that that's totally fine.
Yeah, I don't think that's appropriate. Now, look, by all means, you can be in favor of them.
Maybe she had a child. Maybe she had a child in her classroom
who wanted to go on Grindr and have sex with adults. Is that your argument?
No, I mean, I'm not saying that. First of all, I don't know. Again, this is
why would a 10-year-old need Grindr?
This is the thing that you do, though, Tim.
Oh, that
You're picking specific examples that are inflammatory.
You asked me for one.
You're giving specific examples. Well, yeah, that's called information. I've had to deal with this same stupid argument before when I brought up what happened to Corey Mason, the trans youth icon who then turned to OnlyFans and is now getting paid for videos of themselves masturbating with their underdeveloped penis. So yes, specific examples. Am I supposed to give non-specific examples? Which examples are acceptable to you? Well, probably only those that are from left-leaning outlets that are going to be very careful in making sure that the truth of this situation never comes to light. Well, that is, of course, if they're even aware of it, since you're supposed to be a pundit who's pushing for the leftist idea, and you're not even familiar with what's actually in genderqueer.
Okay, then go ahead.
I did. We have the book.
Yeah, I
said don't show children blowjobs.
Look,
you said you appreciate it.
I'm not in favor of censorship.
As an objective observer that's sitting here, you asked for a specific example. He gave it to you, and then you try to say he's broadly in favor of censorship.
Yeah.
It's possibly to make a hypocrisy point later on when he complains about social media censorship or something like that.
No,
but it's like he's talking about this specific issue. And I remember I was working on an education series about this kind of thing years before it was popular. Yes, I was ahead of my time. And yeah, these kind of things were popping up all over schools. And I am happy that DeSantis is like doing something.
We had Asra Nomani on the show. She brought in, I think, like 70 books of all of the weird racist indoctrination and sex stuff that they're bringing in schools.
Yeah.
And I said, look, man, it's really simple for me. If someone comes to me and says that they think this book, which Amazon says is 18 up only, should be given to children, I'll say, I will vote against you.
So should the Bible be banned from schools because it depicts sexual acts?
It is banned from schools, public schools.
The Bible.
Time for another whataboutism. The Bible's already banned from schools. Schools are supposed to be religiously neutral. But I don't care what version of the Bible you have, it doesn't have graphic depictions of sex acts. For fuck's sake.
Probably is not appropriate for children for a lot of reasons. And I am not a Christian, so I don't particularly care about whether or not they're going to give a book to children that has something like Deuteronomy 23:20 in it. I don't think kids should be reading that kind of stuff.
Okay.
However, I'm in favor of the parents deciding when it is appropriate for their kids, which comes with very difficult moral questions in that my morality is different from the morality of each individual parent. So that's why I'm kind of like, the government probably shouldn't be the one doing it.
Have you had an expert on sexual education on your program to talk about this kind of stuff?
Yes.
What did they say?
And
are you in favor of abstinence only?
No. It's been a very, very long time.
You're not in favor of abstinence only education.
I think abstinence only is
so
silly.
You're kind of hinging on this book that has pornographic material in it that okay.
There's a difference between sex and kink. Right?
Okay, sure.
So the many individuals on the left have made arguments in favor of kink for kids, which is weird to me, and I think it's inappropriate. I think kids should learn about sex. I think the parents should decide when it's appropriate. This is why typically at schools they would give out notice to the parents like, we're intending on doing sex ed. Here's the subjects we're going to cover.
Nothing's changed.
The issue with Florida was that they had a policy where they would not instruct parents and actually were told not to talk to the parents if the kids were suffering identity issues. Now, the state should not intervene and take away the rights of the parents in that in that way.
Can you say that again? That the state, what about gender identity issues?
So in Florida, what prompts a bill like this, and it also happened with stuff in like Nashville, was that the schools, and I think they do this in like Washington and Colorado, the schools were actually telling teachers not to talk to the parents if the children were having some kind of identity issue. And so this led to suicides.
No. What leads to suicides is that children are being told that they cannot operate and be who they are as the gender that is who they are in their heart. That's what's leading to suicides.
I'm talking about one specific. Well, I think it's like
again, you're talking about one specific example. I'm talking about broader.
You can't ask me for like.
I talk about politics, Tim. I don't talk about anecdotes.
Well, he's talking about policy that they would not.
You asked me what the policy was.
You're talking about school district policy. I cover national politics.
You asked me to.
Yeah. All right.
You can't ask me a question. Then when I explain where the policy came from, be like, no, that makes no sense.
You go into individual anecdotes.
I'm telling you why the policy was written.
I'm going to take a moment to point this out again. This whole individual anecdotes thing is such horse shit. Because the same people who will suggest that anything that they don't like is anecdotal, as far as like what evidence it is, will also tell you how dare you not respect the lived experience of insert marginalized person here. And the lived experience of the marginalized is held with as much weight as peer-reviewed studies. And if you dare to try to deny them of that, then you are racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic. Again, just hit them with the shotgun blast of oppression. It's either anecdotal or it's not.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
That's why the policy was written, because there were children who were having identity issues, and the schools were instructed, the teachers were told not to tell the parents. This led to, I think it was a suicide attempt. The parents got angry.
Who had a suicide attempt?
A little girl tried to kill herself.
Okay, again, this is one case. Go ahead.
And there was also another, right. I'm not talking about, look at this anecdote, let's set policy. I'm saying Florida set a law because, okay? I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm saying a thing led to a thing, right? Mm-hmm. My position is that parents should be fully informed about what's going on with their children, and teachers should not withhold that information from them. It is not up to the state to decide what is best for the kid. There are certain exceptions.
But the state is deciding what is best for the kid in these instances. They are essentially saying that children, take Florida, for example. You're talking about Florida. Let's talk about it. They're saying that children cannot, under the supervision of their doctor and with their parental consent. None of this happens, by the way, without parental consent. It's illegal. They cannot work with their doctor on a healthcare plan for them to transition into their gender.
I'm not talking about that. I mean, you're talking about medical intervention. I'm talking about
but you have spoken about this on your program before.
Yeah, I think like if a doctor prescribed a lobotomy to a kid, the government should stop that.
It's not a lobotomy. That's not what it is.
I'm saying.
Brief side note, you'll notice how she's not suddenly talking about the parental rights of parents who are not on board with gender transition. Let's keep going.
That there are certain things in the medical world that we've prohibited.
Right, but this is not what should. One of them. But the American
you
Journal.
Disagree? You think it shouldn't be?
No,
I'm not arguing you're
every
wrong.
single expert that is reputable on this front disagrees. The American Journal of Pediatrics did a study about transitioning children. They studied them over 5 years. 94% of the children continued to identify as the gender that they were choosing to identify with at the beginning.
For 5 whole years?
Yeah,
wow.
yes.
When placed on Lupron.
No. Then the 6% that were remaining, 3.5%, identified as cisgender, 2.5% went back, yes, but they were heavily weighted under the age of 10 years old,
But this is
where
not
they
material to what
never
I was
had
talking about.
any medical intervention. This is how actually trans care actually goes, Tim. 8 to 13 years old, you're put on puberty blockers. Those are entirely reversible. Then after
I'm sorry.
that is 100% true.
It's just not true.
That's 100%.
Wrong. As this article from Mayo Clinic points out, some of the changes triggered by gender-affirming hormone therapy cannot be reversed. Others may require surgery to reverse. I will also link this New York Times article that goes into the studies about this, but there are also side effects, for example, loss of bone density, etc.
They're not entirely reversible. To a certain degree, they can be.
Then why are they used in instances where someone has puberty that
precocious puberty?
That's precocious
right,
puberty.
right, exactly. And there's a carve out for that in the Florida bill, by the way. So cis kids can have it, but trans kids can't.
Because
Well, Emma, probably because people with precocious puberty are only going to pause it until they reach the age of average puberty, in which case they will go off of those puberty blockers. People who are trans stay on them forever.
that's the primary label.
16 years
that's the
old.
primary use of the drug.
Okay, but that's not what doctors say. No. Then 16 years old, years old, that's when hormones happen. Very, very, very rarely are there any surgeries under the age of 18. I don't hear you talking about rhinoplasties under the age of 18 on your program.
We have.
Oh.
Maybe you haven't heard it because you don't watch the show.
Okay.
I've also said child beauty pageants are wrong and they're disgusting. I've also said Hooter is inappropriate for kids. And I said we shouldn't be giving minors any kind of cosmetic surgery. I don't even like tattoos or piercings. So when it comes to...
It's quite puritanical of you, Tim. I'm surprised. You have a lot of swords
I don't think
and
children
and stuff in here.
I don't think children should make should be altering their bodies.
But you just said parental rights. So if under 18, parents have to give consent for piercings and tattoos. And
do you think a
for
mom should have the
rhinoplasties.
right to remove the salivary glands of her child?
No. Are
if
you
the
for
doctor
parental
prescribes
rights or not?
See, this is a
Every right has limits.
What is actually interesting because what you're asking, we've actually talked in a great depth about on Timcast IRL. That
are you for parental rights or not? I just asked.
That question right there leads in two different directions, which is, again, we've addressed. If you watched the show, you'd have heard the statement we've made about it.
Well, I heard you 5 minutes ago say you were for parental rights, and now you're saying you're not.
Where do parents' rights begin and where do they end is strictly a moral question based on the moral frameworks of an individual. If there is someone who goes to a doctor in, say, Saudi Arabia and the doctor prescribes female circumcision, they're going to argue it's the parents' rights. We would argue
another
against
hypothetical. I'm talking about reality.
These things literally do happen in other countries.
But it wouldn't be a doctor.
I'm talking about this country, and I'm talking about parental rights.
A point. The point is, the idea that parents have a right is limited to what our moral limits are. Meaning, if you morally are okay with a child sex change, then you're going to argue in favor of parents' rights. If I say you shouldn't be able to mandate vaccinations, you'd probably argue against the parents' right, right? Should a school be allowed to mandate vaccines for children?
Yes.
But what about the parents' rights? Are you for parents' rights?
Well, I'm for public health.
But you're not for parents' rights. You see, that question leads nowhere.
No, I mean, look, Tim, I've never made parental rights a plank of my own politics.
She's been spewing parental rights through this whole fucking show.
I'm saying this within the context of what you just said 5 minutes ago.
And I'm explaining.
Yes,
parental rights extends to my morality.
So, right, your morality says that you think that trans children and parents, even if they agree with their child and the doctor is supervising this kind of transition, you're essentially saying that you don't believe that they should have the power and ability and that the state should intervene. That sounds like big government to me.
I don't know if you know who I am.
Well, okay, then there you go. That the state should intervene because you don't believe that parents should, and their children, they're in agreement.
So at first, my position was, early on, if the doctors are prescribing it and it's the best thing they can do, I think we're looking at, in the past 4 years, about 50,000 or so cases of cross-sex hormones for kids. So be it. And then we started seeing like the Tavistock scandal. We saw Finland, Denmark, Sweden start pulling this. The research coming out showed that it was not particularly effective. And then we also had multiple studies showing that desistance rates for those who did not take any, who did not receive intervention was actually upwards of 95%. And then my position became, it probably is the appropriate thing for the legislature to say, we're not going to allow this anymore.
Okay, I just listed the American Journal of Pediatrics. That's incredibly reputable. Incredibly reputable. 94% of children continued care after age. Take a Netherlands study. This is Lancet. 98% continued hormone therapy and follow-up.
After what?
The other one's a 5-year study. This is just a secondary
after
one.
what point?
Well, no. So this is the issue, right? Those studies were based upon whether a child was placed on puberty blockers or not. When a child is placed on puberty blockers, they tend not to desist. When a child is left alone, they tend to desist. So the issue is then, if, according to, 10 prospective follow-up studies from child and adolescents found desistance ranging from 61 to 90%, then the safety of the children would lean towards non-intervention.
Go ahead. Again, we should probably agree to look at these kinds of studies before we're going to pull them up for a debate. Because
now she wants to call time out before you guys start talking about studies. She's still not going to face the fact that there are no long-term studies. Just like nobody did during the congressional hearing. They just kept saying that the doctor, Miriam, the one with the glasses, who's from What is a Woman, was just spreading dangerous disinformation. They wouldn't engage with her on anything that she said that they thought was dangerous disinformation. They wouldn't go over any of the points that she made. They just kept saying it was hateful rhetoric and was going to lead to kids committing suicide. That was the only way they handled it. In this instance, she's also not going to face the fact that there are no long-term studies. The funny thing is there's warning labels on just about everything else. If there's no long-term studies for children on it, then it's not recommended that you give it to them. And that's even for stuff like herbs, like St. John's wort or whatever, supplements, things like that. There's no studies like in the long-term effects of, say, a supplement like creatine. So they say don't give it to kids because there's no studies as to whether or not that's safe in the long run. And, that is normally the default. We're not doing that here. Instead, for ideological reasons, we're allowing the medical industries to look at us and say, yeah, it's okay to do this thing that we don't have any long-term studies as far as the safety for. This was all gone over in a video that you can also find on my channel, where Dan Crenshaw put the screws to one of these quote-unquote reputable experts that Emma was referring to, and this was what resulted.
Questions are for Dr. McNamara. I just want to ask you, honestly, you're not concerned about the unknown effects of puberty blockers, hormones, and surgical interventions in kids, the long-term effects, not concerned about that?
Everything I've said here today comes from a place of deep honesty and conviction for the care that I provide and the community that I'm a part of.
You've said that we've cherry-picked data. How do you mean that?
So it is very unscientific and flawed to pick a single study or a single statistic and to discuss it in isolation.
Totally agree.
Medical experts are able to talk about all of the evidence as a whole.
Totally agree. So it's good to look at systematic reviews, right? That's the gold standard of evidence when you're trying to understand whether something works or whether it doesn't. So the British Journal of Medicine looked at 61 systematic reviews with the conclusion that, quote, there is great uncertainty about the effects of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries in young people. The Journal of Endocrine Society came up with the same conclusion, even the American Academy of Pediatrics. They all cite the lack of evidence. And so here's the thing. If you're doing a therapy and it's, temporary, whatever, fine, maybe let's try it, let's see if it works. But when you're talking about permanent physiological changes, do you not agree, just from an ethical standpoint, that you might want extremely strong evidence of the benefits? And there is no systematic review that states that there is strong evidence of benefits.
Sir, are you aware of how the quality evidence grading system works and how it's applied?
Yeah, we read through it. That's why I'm citing these journals. So which journal says something different? We should have that debate. Tell me a journal that has done systematic reviews that cites different evidence, that cites strong evidence for benefits of these therapies.
The standards of care were developed based on extensive...
You're not telling me any journal, you're not telling me any study. Don't say standards of care.
Yeah, so...
Tell me one.
The standards of care.
That's the standards of care. That's not a journal, that's not a study. That's not an organization. That's not.
So at one point in the Victorian era, the standards of care for women who could have orgasms was to cut their clitoris off. At one point, the standards of care included electroshock therapy. At one point, the standards of care included lobotomies. To suggest that the standards of care themselves are the evidence is just absolute horse shit.
An institution, you're just saying words. Name one study. Yeah. I'm out of time. I yield back.
And she can't name one study because there aren't any. That's one of the reasons why Emma's just spewing off all of these organizations that this same witness did as well, as saying, well, they all agree about this. It doesn't matter. They also all admit that they don't have any fucking evidence. At that point, I don't give a shit what you think the standards of care should be. You're incompetent. Let's hear just a bit more of that testimony.
There's a lack of scientific evidence regarding the effectiveness of these medical interventions, especially among minors, which is why countries in Europe, such as Denmark, Britain, Sweden, have described treatments as experimental and are urging doctors to proceed with caution, and why they've changed their guidance. The purpose of healthcare is to treat and heal, and it's not of interest at the expense of physical and mental well-being of patients. What evidence, Dr. Grossman, do we have that the thriving Dr. McNamara talks about is because of hormones or surgery and psychotherapy, family support, regression to the mean, placebo effect, or some other confounding variable? After all, there have been no randomized controlled trials. Have there been randomized controlled trials, Dr. McNamara?
There have not. Randomized controlled trials are what are the gold standards. That gold standard, that is what we're always looking for in medicine. We do not have those kind of studies. As you said, there are variables, confounding variables that can interfere. If a child is going through these gender-affirming cares, so-called, the child may also be getting psychotherapy. The family may be getting support. How do we know that the improvement on the other side is due to the hormones or the surgeries or the psychological support?
Yeah. Thank you.
Because what I'm pulling up and what I'm referencing is inherently reputable, and you can find any information that you want on the internet. Yep. I am with a majority of doctors on this front. That's
a broad statement. I don't know about that.
No, that is actually a fact. That is 100% a fact.
Well, I've seen this movie before. So what's happening is you're referencing detransition under a system where they wouldn't be put on puberty blockers necessarily, and then they would go through the cross-sex hormone. So everybody who would have desisted at the point of puberty, which is what you're referencing, is already excluded from her sample. So, and I don't even think you would disagree with that once they're actually past the point of puberty and they still think they're in the opposite body or whatever, and they go through the process, there's a very low detransition rate. But you're specifically talking about desistance.
Look,
and I remember this because this happened when you argue with the serfs.
This is what it boils down to. I'm not a moralist. I don't have the arrogance to believe that my personal preferences for how my life would be lived should be imposed on other people. I'm trying to make a argument for a case for, I'm trying to make a case for a broad set of policies that are going to make sure people are as happy as they can possibly be and can live their life to the fullest.
I want people to be able to live their lives to the fullest, which is why I think that they should be able to engage in a treatment that hasn't been properly tested by any metric that would have previously been used. It's the same thing with the vaccines that she said earlier people should be forced to take. There were no long-term studies for those either, as Brett Weinstein and I discussed. It's a scientific fact that you cannot make any statements about the long-term safety of a goddamn thing that hasn't been done long-term. This is just simple, basic, scientific method 101. And she keeps spitting out the word reputable. No organization that would suggest such a thing should be reputable in the first place. That should be the end of their reputation altogether, period.
So if you want to impose your morality on people, it sounds like fundamentalism. For me, I'm in favor of
a real argument.
But if most
I am having a real argument.
That's not enough.
You just said your morality
here's
is
a study.
man.
Here's a study that shows desistance rates up to 95%. Hold on. Desistance rates are shown up to 95% with non-intervention. So then we would lean towards non-intervention. And you said you're a fundamentalist. You didn't make an argument.
No, earlier you talked about how your morality is what you want to dictate in terms of this policy.
Wait,
she's changing the subject again, and this time just trying to essentially engage in veiled ad hominem personal attack, because she knows, again, she's backed into a corner.
You see, this is what I was talking about with Sam.
Okay.
Right? The inability to grasp philosophical concepts. When I explained to you that you are opposed to parental rights because you're in favor of vaccine mandates, right? I don't think you can understand the duality of the statement you're making. Are you in favor of parental rights can go in one of two moral directions? You do have a moral stance.
I wasn't talking about parental rights. I was using that as a way to talk about your statement on parental rights.
And I fully grasp concepts of morality. And you want to impose that, then you too would be a fundamentalist, and you've made a nonsensical statement. If you want to make an argument about why me using this data is incorrect, I'm all ears. If you want to tell me I'm a fundamentalist, I haven't
seen the data, so I can't.
Well, then don't make an argument.
Well, that's funny. You had no problem a moment ago having an opinion on a book you've never read.
argument about if you don't know the data.
No, I do know the data. I use the American Journal of Pediatrics. I don't know the data that you just pulled up.
You did not look up desistance rates. You did not look up anything other than what fits your narrative.
Tim, what you just said is that you want your morality to dictate policy.
No, I didn't.
I want people to have freedom to do what they want.
That's just not true. I said that everyone's view on a question like parental rights is dictated by their morality. You do have one as well. People have a moral framework. You've told me that you're in favor of public health. That is a moral stance. So are you a fundamentalist? Do you want to impose your moral?
I talk about politics. I don't talk about things that are so abstract. I talk about
You're in favor of vaccine mandates or not?
Of course.
That's a moral position, not a scientific one.
No, it is a public health position.
Well, that's funny. You had no problem a moment ago having an opinion on a book you've never read.
It's sure your morality dictates that the government can impose a medication on people against their will.
Because I'm trying to create a society.
That's a moral question.
No, because I'm trying to.
That's moral.
Sure, I think I am more moral.
But you just said you weren't. You said you were not a moralist.
No, I'm not. I am dealing in politics, and politics can create outcomes that are moral or immoral. And
so she basically keeps doing that doublespeak through most of the conversation. You guys could check that out on Tim's channel. There was one other moment that is worth mentioning where she said, well, Tim, why is it that Nazis like your show? And Tim went off on her on that. Honestly, I think he kind of gave her the pimp hand and the bitch hand about that. And also just responded with, well, that's interesting because there are mass shooters that like your show. And she didn't have an answer for that. And she won't. It was just kind of a meaningless ad hominem. It's just like the people that I mentioned earlier that decided to say that the people who were protesting against pedophiles and such, that just happened to have Nazis show up, say, see, you're doing what the Nazis are doing. Therefore, you're also bad like them. It's just asinine. There was a Bernie supporter who engaged in a mass shooting. That's not Bernie Sanders' fault. Even Actual Justice Warrior has openly admitted that. So anyway, I wanted to bring this back around to why I made this video, which is that we have two people here that are highly influential. I mean, one of them is literally testifying before Congress. She has no idea what the hell she's talking about. She wants to push certain, agendas so far as trans athletes in sports, and she's not even familiar with, or rather will gaslight you into trying to believe that there are no, biological differences between the sexes that might be relevant to sport. She brings up Serena Williams, and Serena Williams was a horrible example. But again, this person is very confident in their beliefs and believes that you should believe the same as they do. And they want to see the government enact policies based on those beliefs. And she's an idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Then you have Emma, who once again is pushing that, for certain policies, pushing, she said for politics, not morality. And then she was talking about morality. And then she was talking. Anyway, she's a pundit with a lot of, big audience who's been on the Young Turks and then on, the show with Sam Cedar. She's got a huge audience, bunch of subscribers, and she's pushing for certain policies, and she's just spewing nonsense and lies about what's actually going on with the gender transition issue. This is a very big problem right now. You don't have to know what the hell you're talking about. You can just spew off whatever the hell you want. And I'm not saying that the right doesn't do this sometimes too. They absolutely do. That's why my artwork has me, decapitating both the Democrat and the Republican viewpoint and telling people to start thinking for themselves. The thing is that neither of these people are thinking for themselves. They're just spewing the rhetoric of the religion or the tribe that they have chosen to be part of. Do not be these people. Thanks for tuning in. So just a reminder that on Monday, folks, at 10 a.m., that is when we have postponed the interview with Mac Beggs to. If you guys tune in, you'll be able to listen to it live. Obviously, I will leave the live up after the fact. Mac Beggs has agreed to answer the tough questions. Nothing is off the table so far as their participation in sports as a trans athlete. That'll be at 10 a.m. on Monday. But before that, tomorrow at 6 p.m., I'll have another co-show with Liberty Unleashed. My friend Brian from way back when I first started podcasting and I are now doing a regular show on this channel and his channel every 6 p.m. on Sunday, unless otherwise stated. We are going to have on the head of the Libertarian Party of Colorado and the head of the Republican Party of Colorado to discuss a recent kind of peace agreement between the two of them not to run candidates against each other. So we'll be discussing that tomorrow, and I hope to see all of you guys there. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell, and please go to hy.page/vradio. On my HY page, you'll see me on all of my different mediums, and I do want you guys to subscribe to me everywhere. Like I said, I've been talking about this for a while. Neo Unrealist, one of my favorite YouTubers, recently got kicked off YouTube, and he was doing things, at least at the time, that were definitely along the same vein of the things that I do. He was talking more about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and then he just suddenly gets his entire channel deleted. They didn't even suspend or warn him. So I know my days are numbered. So make sure that you guys also have me on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute. All of those links are here at hy.page/vradio. You can also follow me on Spotify and multiple podcast mediums. All of these videos are turned into audio podcasts, if that's the preference for you. If you go to the Fans of V Radio Facebook group, it's one of the best ways to be sure you always get my videos, because I always do an @everyone to tell everybody, hey, I just uploaded something. And the reason for that is that people don't always get notifications from me for YouTube. I also get people who report to me that they've just randomly been unsubscribed. So if you don't use Facebook, you can also follow me on Twitter. I am shadow banned on Twitter, so you're going to have to use the link to find me there. If you want to support me on Patreon or PayPal or Subscribestar, you can. I am not pushing that right now because currently I am financially stable. You guys helped me a lot. So if you're in any kind of bad position, don't worry about donating right now. If I ever need it again, I'll let you guys know. I also have a Telegram channel, and I got to recommend my Discord. We have a lot of great conversations in there. There's lively debates between people. Just remember that the main rule is no personal attack. I do have a Getter account. I don't really do much with it, and V-Radio is now also on Kick and on TikTok. I tried making a few shorts, and I figured, well, if I'm going to make YouTube shorts, I might as well throw them on TikTok as well. I don't really do much there. But it does exist. But for the sake of redundancy, make sure that you guys have subscribed to me on all of my mediums. And Discord is really the best way to be absolutely sure that you get notified every time I do something, along with Facebook. Thanks again for tuning in, folks. I really appreciate your support. And if you can't in any way, well, or rather, again, I'm not even asking for donations right now, but if you want to support what I'm doing, help me fight the algorithm and share these videos. I mean, you really got to share them yourself, because even liking and subscribing isn't enough. People who do things like show, well, the edited version of genderqueer, they're not treated very well by the medium. So just do me a favor and share this stuff. You know, my best, as far as like recommendations, that add to my channel have always been through word of mouth. So please consider sharing my channel and what it is that you like about it with other people. And also leave comments. It helps me out with the algorithm. Take care.